Peak Cycles episode 70, and I had mentioned in the past we're going to touch on the Disco Moss and Motley Crue build, and that is what we're going to do today. Some highlights and obstacles we may have run into, which I did run into, and I preached this many times in the past to do a complete mock-up of your build before doing any cosmetics. That way, if anything goes wrong, you can make your changes and not have to worry about screwing up your paint or powder coat, chrome plating, etc. So with this build, the Disco Moss, or actually both builds, I did something different. I know Peak Cycles is known for handlebars, but I wanted to change things up, and I went with what's called bar ends. Very much used in the motorcycle world. These are actually sold for motorcycles, and basically your fork tube runs through the big area here, and the small area is where your handlebars come out. So you mount them on your forks, and then your handlebars come out like this, come off the fork, put a top cap on your top crown, super clean, no stem. I did a complete mock-up, which you saw in the past videos. I rode the bike up and down the street, no issues at all. Did all the cosmetics, threw it on the table, getting ready to build, and sure enough, ran into an issue. Let's go ahead and hit the shop and see what's happening with Peak Cycles. Okay, here's the deal. This shim is not going to open up these bar ends enough to slip over this fork tube. Basically, there's so much powder coat, flake, clear coat that is just not going to work. I tried. So what I'm going to do is I measured the distance between this bar end and the tree, which is 2 1/4 inches. I'm going to cut down the fork tube to this mark right here, 2 3/4 inches. Going to add a raw piece of steel of the same length, and this sleeve is going to run all the way down the fork to give it strength. You'll see what I mean here in a minute. Wish me luck. In for the home stretch. And as mentioned, this sleeve runs all the way through this tree to give it strength. I tacked in the 1.5 inch here all the way around so it doesn't move. I'm going to push this all the way down. We're going to put it up on the frame and put our bar ends on top tree, and let's see what happens. Moving right along. That's how we're looking so far. Go ahead and get that shiny tree and bar ends on and keep it going. Super happy with the end result. And I say this all the time. If you can think it, you can do it. And when I ran into that issue with the fork, I was looking at it for a good minute and I was thinking to myself, man, what am I going to do? I already spent all this money on cosmetics and powder coat and everything else. And if you're into custom bicycles or custom anything for that matter, you're going to run into obstacles. I mean, technically we're doing things that are out of the ordinary. So the beautiful thing about it is the steel that I added, the raw steel, you can't even see it. The triple trees, the bar ends clamp right over it. Transition from the fork with the powder coat comes out perfectly. If I didn't tell you, you wouldn't even know it was there. Moving on to the bottom bracket, square tapered bottom bracket. I've talked about this in past episodes and people are still hitting me up, asking me about it, so I thought we'd highlight that. Let's go ahead and hit the shop and keep going. Touched on this topic several times in past episodes, but we're getting ready to install what's called a square tapered bottom bracket. We'll go ahead and do a quick recap. And it's called square tapered because it has a square tapered spindle versus a spline spindle or American style spindle. And they are smaller in diameter, so you're going to need these conversion cups, which reduces the size versus these American bottom bracket shells. These do install with 3 little Allen bolts that run from the opposite side this direction. When installing the bottom bracket, this is where most people make their mistake. It is labeled left and right. So this would be your left side, that side, right side on this side. And most people naturally want to thread clockwise, which is usually standard for almost everything. In this case, these thread counterclockwise. And it should go in literally that easily. If you feel like you're forcing it, stop and start again. Once you get close to getting it all the way down, you're going to take this handy dandy tool here. You're going to install it here and you're going to take your wrench and give it one last hand tight torque. Remember, counterclockwise. Let's go ahead and cut the video and keep it going. So here I have it pretty much tightened down by hand as far as it can go. So here's the bottom bracket tool along with the wrench, and I'm going to give it one last pull like that. That's all you want. Trust me, you pull on this hard enough and you'll strip it out. Let's go ahead and get the other side installed. So here we're on the left side of the bike, and not to confuse you with the way we threaded on the right side, is the left side threads clockwise. So in other words, both sides are threading toward the rear of the bike. And again, it should be this easy. And once you get close to having it hand tight, you're going to take that tool with the wrench and give it one last torque. Good to go. Crank and chain ring on one side. Let's get the other. There you go. Square tapered bottom bracket, pretty self-explanatory. And the tool I used, this here, is a must to tighten down that bottom bracket. You can't do it any other way. So I highly suggest you purchase one. It has a very technical name, so lodge this down or write it down. It's called bottom bracket tool. Seriously, that's what it's called. Around 15, 20 bucks. You can buy them on Amazon or directly through Park Tool. Highly suggested. I'm gonna bounce around today. Gonna move on to the Motley Crue build and the tank plates and mounting them. So let's hit the shop and keep it going. Received a care package here from our good friends at Coast to Coast Trophies in Arizona. And these are basically acrylic or plexiglass tank plates printed from the backside. Some beautiful work. Just finished drilling these out. Started out like this. I'm gonna open this up so these receivers will tack in right there. Similar to what we did on the hot rod, only we're going to use single tapped versus two. Just go and tack them in and keep them moving. So I'm using the vise here to keep everything squared up. Just pretty much squeeze that receiving nut in the vise there, lay the tab on top, and I'm going to tack it in. Quick update, frame is up on the frame jig, and this happens to be the first T2 prototype ever, and my wife grabbed it. Don't mind showing you the frame because this build is going to have to do more with the theme, so no big deal. Got the tabs in. These are a little different than what I had on the vise. Smaller hardware, but pretty much the same concept. Gonna weld them in, do a mock-up on the ground, and keep it moving. And so here we have the wheel set, compliments of Mark Deasy. Built these for me quite a while ago now because of the pandemic. They've been sitting in a box. 8-gauge spokes. This is a 24x4 rear, 26x3 front. Go ahead and get the tires on so we can get that kickstand mocked up. Put a mock up on the ground before we put the tires on. Get a quick look. It's looking good so far. Go and get those tires mounted up. Got the wheels and tires on. Getting ready to weld on the kickstand. I think we have the proper lean. We'll know more as soon as I tack it on, and I'll tell you about that here in just a minute. So what I've done is I've tacked just one side so that when I flip the kickstand up, I'm making sure that I run in parallel with the bottom of the frame, not going up or down. Got lucky, hit it in the first try, so let's go ahead and tack the other side and weld it up. One last thing you want to check for before you weld this in is you want to turn the wheel completely the opposite direction. The reason for that is you don't want your kickstand in a situation where the bike's going to fall this way. So you could actually even pull it up just a little. The idea is to get it close to that balancing point with the wheel pointing this way, but then still plenty of lean that way. I think we're about ready to tear this down, throw it up on the frame jig and weld it up. One last thing about this kickstand is do not weld that tab in with the kickstand in. You will melt that aluminum. getting ready to drill out the tank plates for the Motley Crue build. But before we do, I'm going to touch on the hardware I've been using. Super simple. You can find any of this in the hardware store, Lowe's, Home Depot. And I'm basically mimicking what's known as rivet nuts or finishing rivets, much used on hot rods and body panels and fenders and quarter panels and such. Going to start off with what's called a coupling nut, threaded on both sides, so you can mount your plates on each side of the frame. You've got your Allen screw here. You're going to go with a tapered head, and this is called a finishing washer. Put it all together and provide some really nice detail when it comes to mounting hardware. Let's go and drill out those plates. All drilled out, which is quite stressful. Last thing you want is a blowout, which is basically the acrylic shattering while you're drilling. So you want to start off with a small bit and work your way up. There you go, more tank plate recap, much like the hot rod, a little different, but pretty much the same concept. And kickstand recap. Quite honestly, when I finished the fabrication for that Motley Crue build, I was really pressed for time. I sent it to Powder Coat. When he came back, I built both bikes pushing for OBC with no video. Wow, wow, wow. I apologize for that. However, I did debut and share them with you in episode 67. So if you would like to see them in their completed state, if you haven't already, check out that episode. As for building the bikes themselves, I have planned for the near future a multi-episode series of custom bike building. I've done several episodes in the past. However, I bounced back and forth from fabrication to bike building, and the search becomes a little difficult. So what we're going to do is do a multi-part, part 1, part 2, part 3, and it'll touch on the title. We'll say what it is we're working on that day, whether it's headsets, forks, and you and I will build one bike together. How's that sound? Got some exciting things around the corner. Actually, I have a few one-offs in the books, so we're really going to change things up to end the year. That's pretty much going to wrap it up. Hope you enjoyed today's version of what's happening at Peak Cycles. And until next time, make it a killer day! Morning. Welcome to episode. There you go. Bottom bracket. There you go. Squared. There you go. Squared tapered bottom bracket. Pretty self-explanatory. And morning. Welcome to Peak Cycles episode 70. And I had mentioned in the past, did my voice just crack? The idea is to get it close to that balancing point with the wheel pointing this way, but then still plenty of lean that way. Looking good. Let's go ahead and weld it up.